In the city of Baghdad, there was a poor house. From this house, loud cries could be heard. A woman was shouting in a high voice, and her children were crying. It felt like a disaster had struck them. Their father, Yusuf, was bowing his head and bearing his wife's anger. This was many years ago when a terrible illness spread in Baghdad, and many people got sick, including Yusuf. Because of this illness, Yusuf became weak, helpless, and unable to work. At first, his wife and children managed to go a few days without food, but now they could not bear it any longer. Seeing his children cry, Yusuf went to the kitchen to find something to eat, but there was nothing left in the house. All the pots were empty. His wife said, "Think of a job. Sitting here like this will make our children starve." Listening to her words, Yusuf replied, "I have never been lazy in my life, but this illness has made me weak. You know that." His wife's words troubled him a lot, so he began searching the house again. Finally, he found a long rope and said, "I will sell this rope and bring back something to eat for the children." After hearing Yusuf, his wife said, "What about tomorrow? What will we do then?" Yusuf replied, "Tomorrow is a long way off, and my God is in charge of tomorrow." He picked up the rope and left the house, trusting in God. He called out in the streets for a long time and finally found a customer. The buyer looked at the rope and said, "I can give you 1 dinar for this." Yusuf said, "This rope is worth more than 1 dinar. I bought it for more a few years ago." The buyer understood that Yusuf needed money, so he said, "The price I offered is fair. If you want to sell it, give me the rope or go and find another buyer." Desperate, Yusuf agreed and sold the rope for 1 dinar. He took the money and happily went home to buy food for his wife and children. Suddenly he saw 2 people fighting. He approached to see what was happening. A young man was grabbing an old man's throat, wanting to take him away, while the old man struggled to free himself. Yusuf said to the young man, "Hey, this old man is like your father. Why are you treating him so badly?" The old man, struggling and scared, said, "For just 1 dirham, he wants to take me to court to send me to jail. Tell me, would God like it if I had lived in this city with honor for many years, but now I am sent to jail for such a small amount?" Yusuf thought about this and realized that someone could be in a worse situation than him. If this old man went to jail, who would take care of his wife and children? With that thought, he took out 1 dinar from his pocket and gave it to the young man, saying, "Here is 1 dinar. Let this old man go home to his family." When the young man left, the old man regained his strength and raised his hands to bless Yusuf, saying, "May God reward you 100 times for your kindness." Hearing the old man's prayers, Yusuf walked home, thinking he would have to return empty-handed, but he felt content in his heart for doing a good deed, despite being poor. When Yusuf reached home, his wife noticed he was silent and had his head down. She understood he could not bring anything for them to eat. She asked, "What happened? Why are you empty-handed? What about the rope?" Yusuf explained everything, and she said, "You did a good deed by saving that old man, but you should know that a lamp that lights the house should not be taken to the mosque. How will you feed our children now?" Yusuf replied, "You are right. I accept your words. But that old man was in more trouble than us. What has happened has happened. Your crying will not bring back the dinar, so let's think about what we will do next. Perhaps another way will come up." He knew his wife's words were bitter but true, so he began to think about what to do. Suddenly he had an idea and looked again at the broken things in the house. He turned this way and that but found nothing worth selling. Finally, he saw an old bed that the children used. He told his wife, "I was looking for this bed. I want to sell it." His wife said, "The children are hungry, and now you want to take away their bed." Yusuf replied, "It's good you said that they are hungry, so the important thing is to provide for them. What difference does it make if the bed is old or not?" Seeing his determination, his wife began to cry, taking the children off the bed. She pleaded, "Just remember, do not sell it for too little so we can feed our children for a few days." Yusuf had no words left to say, so he lifted the bed, wrapped it up, and put it on his shoulder. He left the house. He walked and walked until he reached a market where all kinds of new and old things were bought and sold. When Yusuf called out to sell the bed, a few buyers came to him. They turned the bed over and found 100 faults, then walked away. Finally, one buyer came who liked the bed. He asked how much it cost. Yusuf said, 10 dinars. The buyer thought that was too much for an old, broken bed. He said, "Who would spend 10 dinars on such a bed?" Yusuf rushed after him and said, "Please do not treat me unfairly. I need to sell this bed for less." In the end, he sold the bed for 3 dinars and headed home. On the way, he thought about what food to buy to make his children happy and fill their stomachs. Suddenly he heard an old woman crying. He stopped to see what was wrong. The old woman was holding her young son and pleading, "Take me to the doctor." But the young man was trying to free himself, saying, "Mother, let me go. Where will I get the money for your treatment?" Seeing this, Yusuf went closer and asked what was happening. The old woman said, "I have raised my son with great effort, but now that I am sick, he will not take me to the doctor." The young man said, "I admit my mother has suffered greatly to raise me, but I have no money to take her to a doctor." When Yusuf saw this, he felt troubled and took out all his money, which was 3 dinars, and gave it to the young man. The young man was shocked and wanted to fall at Yusuf's feet, but Yusuf stopped him, saying, "My dear, take care of your mother." After they left, Yusuf stood there in a daze, looking around. After a while, he started heading home, but felt weak from hunger. Despite his condition, he forced himself to go home. He knocked on the door, and his wife and children were waiting. She opened the door quickly, her face filled with joy, but when she saw his sad expression, her happiness faded. She asked, "What did you do? Are you empty-handed again?" Seeing her anger, Yusuf explained everything. After hearing the story, his wife said, "You should not be so generous to others. Do you not care about your children? What will we do now? My children cannot endure hunger much longer, and they may die from it." Yusuf could not even look at his wife. He said, "God is the best of planners. If you had heard the old woman's cries, you would have done the same as I did. But do not worry, God will find a way for us. If I have to take something next time, I will not sell it, but will pawn it so we do not lose it." His wife asked, "Is there anything left in the house that you can pawn?" Yusuf stood in the small courtyard and looked around, saying, "What about that pot? Let me take this pot so I can buy a smaller one in exchange and get something to eat for us." His wife, already angry, replied, "Forget that pot. No one will buy it or pawn it. Just give it to someone or break it." Disappointed, Yusuf went to the pot and said, "Do not humiliate me. You know I am doing all this for our children." He said goodbye to his wife and left the house. When he reached the market, he first went to a perfumer's shop and asked for a loan. The perfumer said, "I can lend you money because I know you. Bring me something you can pawn." Yusuf showed him the pot, but the perfumer said, "This used old pot is not worth pawning." Yusuf left the perfumer's shop and went to other shops, but every effort failed because the pot was too old and no one wanted to lend him money for it. As the sun began to set, Yusuf felt hopeless. He thought, "Maybe I made a mistake promising my wife. No one wants to take this pot and I should sell it." He made up his mind and turned back, calling for buyers and trying to sell the pot. But nobody came. The sun completely set and darkness fell. Tired and alone, he sat down in front of a little light shining from the store of a fishmonger. He felt miserable when a fishmonger passed by and stopped to talk to him. The fishmonger asked, "What are you trying to sell?" Yusuf replied, "This old pot." The fishmonger laughed and said, "This pot is worthless to me, but I can trade you for a fish." Yusuf thought about it and said, "Fine, give me the fish." He took the fish and began to walk home, feeling weak and empty again. When he reached home, his wife saw the fish in his hand and began to cry. She said, "You traded our last thing for a small fish? What will we eat now? We will die of hunger." Yusuf replied, "Do not worry. This fish is enough for us tonight." As she prepared the fish, she suddenly found something shining inside it. It was a beautiful pearl. The pearl was so beautiful that it could be sold for a great price. Yusuf was amazed and said, "This pearl will help us." They rushed to the jeweler and received a fortune for the pearl. With this money, they bought food, clothes, and everything the children needed. Their life became much better, and they lived happily for a long time. One day, a beggar came to their door, and now they were wealthy. Yusuf happily invited him in and offered him help. The beggar was amazed and said, "I have heard stories of your kindness and how you saved that old man. You are truly a generous man." Yusuf replied, "I was just doing what I thought was right. My family was in trouble too, but when I saw someone worse off, I knew I had to help." The beggar blessed Yusuf, and both felt grateful for their good fortunes. This story shows that even in difficult times, kindness and generosity can lead to unexpected rewards.